Good morning, everyone. Presumably, Matt, we just introduce ourselves.
That's correct. Yeah, just
Yep,
to say who you are, give a little bit of introduction and
sure.
go straight into it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Higgins, and I'm here this morning with my colleague Andrew Grounds from the Queen's Communities in Place initiative, which is a cross-institutional initiative based in Queen's University here in Belfast. We have a bricks and mortar presence in a building here, and we have a research team of around 23 professional services and academic staff. And we're here this morning to talk about the civic role in practice using QCAP as an example. So here we go. So what was the problem that QCAP was built to solve here in Queen's? So over many years, there had been a significant amount of research activity undertaken by immensely well-meaning academics who had perhaps got a grant from the NIHR or ESRC and gone in and worked with communities, taken the data, published papers, had very limited accountability, had no sort of desire to stay on working with the communities. And then when the grant ran out, the circus moved to a different part of town. And that extractive research culture really took its toll on communities willing to work with us as an institution and actually researchers and academics across the piece. Also, our view really was that partnerships without structure or long-term institutional support were going to be subject to all those problems that come with loosey-goosey arrangements where goodwill alone can't really sustain any systemic change, and that when funding arrangements end yet again, that sort of connection ended. And we also probably immensely strongly felt that communities without research and evidence capacity, be that with the data or technical support, which allowed them themselves to build credible cases for policy reform or investment. We're going to always be subject to that cycle of short-term grant funding and dependence on people coming in to sort of help them in a helicopter-style way, which was never going to lead to any form of sustainable community academic partnership work. So, how did we come into being? In some ways, it was a bit of a perfect storm. We had started to work with our community partner, who we'll talk about in a sec, in the market community, just in the foothills here of the campus here in Queen's. And it was at the time when the QUB Strategy 2030 was being socialised across the university. And the social and civic responsibility and economic prosperity spine of it, or pillar of it, was really needing something like ourselves to really root the work in what had hitherto been the social charter, but really showing a much stronger collaboration between academic staff here in the institution and with the communities we serve. So we set up deliberately alongside and with hand in glove our public engagement team. And we started phase one at the tail end, November 2021, and ran until in the pilot phase until 2024, so December 24. And our first pilot community where we worked really in depth was with the market, as I say, in South Belfast. And all of this activity was commensurate at that time with the UKRI's engagement and research impact agenda. So moving beyond December 2024, where are we now? So that core support, which I think is important to mention, that the university funded us for. So the first phase was 2021 to 2024, and they have rolled on that phase two institutional core support until 2029. And we continue to try and align what we do with what's happening in terms of UKRI's contemporary engagement and research impact agenda. And I'll be really keen to hear from colleagues today just how those subtle changes might actually be affecting everyone in this space. And I suppose also an increasing focus on what the credentials of what a university's civic mission really need to look like. Everybody, if you look at it, says they've got civic activity, they've got a civic mission, they work in this way. But actually, if you drill down to what universities actually do, there can very often be a very significant gap between what's stated in those big, fancy, glossy strategy papers and what actually, when you poke around and try and look in the ground, what they're actually doing. So I suppose for us, phase one really validated our model, and phase two is building on that foundation to try to find ways of scaling the approach. We're very keen not to say replicate, it's really where it could be adaptable or adapted to elsewhere. And continuing also importantly, not to say we're walking away from our original commitments, but very much deepening those community relationships. We're in this for the long term, and what this phase 2 looks like with them in terms of the maturity is really about seeing where then, when we've built capacity with them, we can take this together. And we're currently, importantly, also trying to make what we do as something that's embedded within the core function of the institution so that we're mainstreamed and not subject to continuous funding cycles. So this slide is really a way of trying to show that while our vision is to become local, national, international model of community academic partnership, demonstrating for us and everyone what is possible when a university commits genuine institutional resource to working alongside our community partners to really drive this civic change. And it's that dual mandate that we talk about here. So we have a research agenda, which is unequivocal and important, and our team has now grown to 23 research and professional services staff. And we work across place-based research areas, health and well-being, education and skills, and community wealth building, which includes a lot actually under that particular banner. We have been successful in generating externally funded, peer-reviewed research that really advances knowledge. And we have done that via securing additional funding from UCRE, ESRC, Innovate UK, but also cross-border funding, given that we're in Northern Ireland, through competitive high-quality bids, such as one that we received from the SEUPB Peace Plus funding stream of 6.7 million euros. So we have been very successful in securing that additional funding, because a university, despite saying it's extremely keen on a civic mission, also wants you to be doing the business around research. And we're also building, of course, a REF portfolio of traceable outputs for submission to the 2029 round. And we're really trying to position Queen's as a leading place-based research institution. And interestingly and importantly, we've also then started to work through having doctoral students who are working explicitly in our programme within that place-based way. And we also try and really nurture that early career research talent through those studentships, but also placements around master's students and other people maybe from the community wanting to learn. And we do see ourselves as continuing and trying very hard to work alongside the zeitgeist around what's happening around the engagement and impact agenda. But nestled alongside that and working very much hand in glove is really the sense that what we're doing now within QCAP no longer sits only within the market community where we started off, but it's now fairly well embedded across the inner city in Belfast here, and the communities that you see there, the market, the first one, New Lodge, Great Shankill, Grosvenor, Sandy Road, Donegal Pass, have all benefited from a bid that we were successful in achieving from UCRI supporting our Community Research and Innovation Network. And that is showing where we're trying to extend our footprint even within the local area. And even since then, we've also been approached by our Department for Communities to work within the broader South Belfast area to really bring an evidence base to some of the very challenging community issues and debates that are which are actually difficult and challenging issues for our colleagues in the policy space. And we've actually just started that piece of work as of last month. And we're building the capacity of those community organisations as a real sense of continuous methodological responsibility woven through every stage of our partnership. So that trust and relationship building is a very deliberate methodological approach that we take. We're seeking to very much translate what we do, initially very much in the local space, to deliver tangible community benefit to, for example, the community wealth building agenda and the successor to the neighbourhood renewal scheme here, the People in Place Review partnership and rollout. We're also very instrumental in all of that work so that what we do is tapped well into the policy space. And we continue to deliver our own university civic mission under Strategy 2030. And they see the value of moving beyond they do excellent work. It's really about maybe a little bit more of a robust evidence base around what we do, really showing how our civic mission is really properly of value to communities. And immensely importantly, we're strengthening the capacity of those community organisations so that they're more capable and resilient over time, including being able to leverage funding for themselves and have a much better awareness of the value of research and data. So our model in terms of how we do it is very much based on community grounding and co-production. Everything we do is genuinely co-designed and worked through with our community partners. We have co-located roles so that there's a much more porous relationship between the community partner and our institution. We, for example, have ensured that our community partners have access to library facilities or relevant facilities across our institution. In terms of how we actually do the business, in terms of our health and wellbeing work, our education and skills, and our community wealth building, we set up dedicated action working groups who would be the sort of methodological engine and the actual working engine of driving forward what we're doing in terms of our programmatic work. And that would be made up of the partners from the Market Development Association, who are the sort of anchor organisation working within the market, also community residents, relevant experts, and of course, academics from across our institution, including ourselves, that are relevant to the issue in hand. We've developed and applied a strong research and evidence infrastructure, and we now manage quite a diverse research portfolio that serves both our academic and community needs. So, for example, we run and have done since we started this work a longitudinal, qualitative longitudinal study called Growing Up in the Market. And that really acts as a source of evidence to gauge key issues within the community. It's with 62 family pairings, so children, young people, and family members. And also interestingly, of late, we have worked with them directly with innovation in some of the census data with our colleague who, I know Anne, who can't be here today, but Professor Ian Shuttleworth has helped develop a grid square product, which actually allows a much more local and nuanced utilisation of data for the community partners, which is much more realistic for their own geographies and is helping them leverage bids in a much more targeted way. We also see ourselves as trying to position ourselves strategically around where these networks then can work to create and convert relationships into joint bids. And the examples I already gave you around UKRI and Peace Plus have been a very good example of that. And also the policy influence, really trying now to think about, can't we, and that word shouldn't be in there, adapt the QCAP model across Northern Ireland and beyond, or elements of it that actually would be helpful for other people to learn from. And we're very keen to maintain an ability to plug into networks and hubs like the LPIP, and we're also part of the recently funded, or not that recently funded, ASRC Centre for Collaboration and Community Connectedness, led out of Sheffield Hallam, and we are the Northern Ireland lead for that. And I already referenced the Belfast Community Research and Innovation Network, which again is an interesting configuration because it's led by the community but worked obviously alongside ourselves in developing it, and we're a key partner in that. We're also internally, and it's something I talked to Beck a lot about, in terms of how do we build our sustainability even within our own institution, really trying to make sure that the personnel we have here are looked after, that we make sure that this work is actually valued, or try and bang the drum to make sure this work is valued across our own institution. And the idea of having hybrid roles across professional services and the academic team is something that we've actually done here in QCAP, which means that we have I suppose, a better hope of sustainability, because some of the posts are now mainstreamed and totally permanent within the university, but we also then have that model where we have contract researchers as well. But we're very much about trying to work with our colleagues in the people and culture space here to try and look at any models that we can support or buy into that actually allow for maybe alternative professorial pathways, etc. And we're also now working in the teaching and learning space, trying to connect what we do here to the education space across some QCAP modules. We also work closely with our widening participation team here, increasing access to community partners, to things like we have a STEAM summer school, which we run every single summer. And we also, as I already mentioned, now have PhDs and placement opportunities here within QCAP. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew to talk about some numbers here. Over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. And as I say, hopefully that's laid out what the QCAP model is and how it's actually advanced in practice. Just want to reflect now on some of the impact that we've managed to create since we started back in 2021. And first, it's to kind of speak to that kind of first mandate that we laid out around the research space. And as you can see there, we have been quite effective in leveraging grant income from numerous research bodies like the SRC, Innovate UK, also the Peace Plus program at a rate of basically net just over 5 million, which is basically for every pound invested that the university has supported us through core funding, represents about nearly £6, which has been a pretty substantive return, and again has been quite important in justifying our presence here in the institution. We've also received a lot of research income as well from, I say a lot, a pretty substantive amount from the Executive Office, the Department for Communities, again, supporting QCAP in its work around trying to gather evidence in local communities, work with them, and have that kind of engaged research model. We're also really kind of aware of if we're going to sustain this model, particularly by working with numerous community partners, it's important for them also to benefit from leverage too. So we've also, through our different kind of engaged research and some of the real practical skills that we're able to offer around evaluation, around business case support, impact evaluation methodologies like SROI have been really applied to help our partners secure investment income themselves to advance what they want to do. And that might be a capital project, it might be funding a staff post, but it's all there again to kind of build this idea of sustainability and to ensure that we're not just a kind of helicopter research project that comes in, extracts research, and then we go off and publish a paper or another research output. It's designed in which our community partners can also benefit from this model. And I think what we found so far is that both that kind of civic mandate and that research mandate, they're not mutually exclusive. And they're actually, if you actually roll them out simultaneously, they can have mutual benefits on both sides. Clearly, again, UKRI are keen to promote research that has a positive impact in terms of engagement and impact. So again, involving our community partners in that work has been really effective in securing that grant income, but also for community partners themselves. So for example, the Market Development Association managed to benefit from a 1.7 million 7-year award from the National Lottery. That's one of the biggest awards made across the UK in recent times. But what they were very keen on, given the net place-based nature of that investment, they were keen in which learning could be diffused, could be transferred to other contexts. So being listed as a partner, and we were able to leverage some of our cross-UK networks like this one, but also the SRC C4 Centre, which really was an attractive to them for giving a vessel to kind of, again, transfer that learning and that practice to other places across the UK. So what as well, in terms of our impact on the ground, so Kathy really mentioned how we've been really active in gathering evidence, standing up structures which promote co-design work, particularly with residents. But we also felt it was a need to translate that evidence into practice to things that the community can ultimately see, be involved with, and benefit from. And that has resulted in quite a substantive programmatic body of work, which is very diverse, particularly focused around the community health and well-being and education and skills space. And we've listed a few examples there of what have been stood up since QCAP has been, since it started. So as you can see, quite a wide body there, looking at issues around substance use, trying to encourage young people to engage with data, promoting STEAM subjects across the university, and probably the most recent and a really impactful initiative around the community wellbeing kitchen, which is looking at issues around food insecurity. It's about nutrition, but also issues related to health and wellbeing more broadly. So there's a real kind of rich collection of programmatic work there, which not only has QCAP been involved in delivering, but also the residents themselves. And it's been really positive to see them starting to take ownership of some of these programs as well now. Clearly, again, with our support, not in terms of delivery, but also from a research and evaluation perspective. And these things are really moving forward really well. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go in the next, in the second phase. Another aspect that we focused on is, again, trying to provide communities with a response that is sustainable. And we've been really kind of, particularly the work in the community wealth building space, about trying to encourage our communities to take up an asset-based response, which is focused around acquiring physical assets that they can own and ultimately benefit on. And why is this important? Well, it's for a number of reasons, but principally, we've talked a lot about grants in the previous slide. The grants are great on one hand, but again, they can be kind of restrictive on another. So it's important that some of these kind of asset-based projects can create an income stream, which is really flexible, it's really unrestricted, and in the long term, critical for sustaining some of those infrastructures that we've developed already. That might be the programmatic work, but it also might relate to staff costs and other overheads that our community partners have to kind of pay for. And this is incredibly critical, again, given the current funding environment. Government funding and sources are drying up. It's becoming increasingly competitive. So it's important that we have a model that encourages our community partners to be autonomous and sustainable in the long term. And there's just a few projects there that we've been working on, which have been designed and delivered in that spirit. And again, obviously, in addition to sustainability, they're obviously contributing to really positive impact on the ground and creating really good opportunities, whether it's around providing more housing, creating jobs, or space for services that the community really need. And also, again, we've talked there about a lot of the change that we're trying to make on the ground, but it's also important as well that we're trying to influence the wider policy environment, because without the right regulatory conditions or institutional arrangements, that change isn't going to happen. And as Kathy's spoken to a lot of these already, but again, we've been very active in trying to kind of really influence that policy, those policy levers locally here in Northern Ireland, but also use our kind of networks nationally through the LPIP hub or the ESRCC Full Centre to kind of have an also influence at that national level too. So very, very quickly, just to wrap up, and again, this might provoke some debate from the following questions, is how adaptable is the QCAP model for universities who want to advance a civic mission? And we think this is really critical because, again, we are starting to see slight shifts and changes in what is an increasingly challenging funding environment, but we want to really try and, again, use this opportunity today to not only share more about QCAP, but to discuss more whether it really does it really represent a response to some of these changing conditions. So hopefully you've enjoyed the presentation, and we'd like to maybe hand it back to you all now to come back with comment or questions. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
Thanks very much for that presentation. It was really good, both. If anybody's got any questions, please do ask.
There's Gary's brave.
Yeah, let me hold on a second. Let me get a little bit louder. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just you mentioned that was it that in 2021 that QCAP was started, and you mentioned that there was a combination of some support from the university, and then you've had some success in external funding. Could you? I'd be interested if you could fill in a picture a little bit in terms of what kind of staffing do you have for QCAP itself, and what are there like explicit linkages with any of the academic units or student programs at the university?
Okay, so at the minute, as I said, the staff team is 23 research colleagues and professional services staff. But if you think about when you talk about the institutional funding, that core support is for, so I am paid from the establishment, but being sort of almost allowed to run this as my sort of full-time job. I do a small amount of teaching and still contribute to supervision, but I've been very fortunate in that the university has secured me to lead this as director. We also then have core funding for the 3-dimension leads, as we call them. So folk at a senior level able to lead the agenda around health and wellbeing, and also education and skills, and the community wealth building agenda. In the new iteration, and we also used to have one admin person, but that person's now actually not there anymore. We also then in the new iteration made sure that at least, I think it's 2 of those posts are core funded permanent posts within the institution. And in order to do that, we had to put them in as professional services staff in a hybrid role with a research brief. So those people are permanent with us. So the core team really is myself and, and the program manager as well. So there's about 5 people who would be the sort of core engine, and then the rest are on contracts but longish term contracts, some up to 5 years, some 4. I think that we have some who would be on shorter, but we're very keen to make sure there's a degree of longevity for those staff as well. There was also funding provided back in the day by the Department for Communities for co-located community coordinator roles, and they actually were really instrumental in getting a lot of the work up and off the ground. In terms of looking to the future, Gary, we're really keen to mainstream more of those posts within the establishment so that we're not subject to funding cycles, concerns around people being able to actually keep carrying out this work, because we've made a commitment long term to these community partners, and the last thing we want to be is exactly the same as all those other people who, when the funding ran out, the circus moves on to a different part of town.
Thank you.
Oh, and in terms of student programs, we are a sort of slightly odd configuration in that we span both one of the university directorates, which is around social and civic responsibility, but also sit within the arts, humanities and social science faculty, and actually nested within the School of Social Science, Education and Social Work. So those students and any of those programs available we're talking about, but actually across the piece. So we also actually have a presence across all the faculty. So some of the health folk are linked with us, etc., etc.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Abby?
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really interesting. I'm sorry I missed the start, but I had another meeting beforehand. My question very much focused on what Gary was talking about, and I think you partly answered it there. I was interested in the extent to which you collaborate with other parts of the university on your research, either in terms of joint bids or in terms of them sort of aligning findings and building on each other's work. You partly answered it then.
We very much do concentrate on, like, for example, the Peace Plus very large grant was done with colleagues in social work and in like medicine. We also then do work in terms of some of the education and skills work with the like actual like engineering and technology folk, because it's about inclusive innovation. We do work in terms of, do you want to say a little bit about your side of things?
Yeah, well,
data.
I think a really good example is the Grid Score data product, which is another UKRI research project being led by a colleague in the School of Natural and Built Environment. But we actually partnered on the project and it's a technical project using census data, dashboards, but what we're interested in is democratizing some of that work so it has a benefit in communities. So we built a whole kind of work package around prototyping the work, connecting it better to the needs of communities, doing a work around data literacy, data advocacy, and again, data for action. Again, not so it's just about using data to understand communities, but how they can apply it in a real, meaningful, impactful way. Again, to leverage resources, income, etc. But that again is across kind of faculty configuration and is kind of demonstrating again that the work of QCAP can bring some of that research to kind of to life and make it relevant in communities that don't always benefit from those investments.
Thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you. And in terms of how you've developed those links between yourselves and the other parts of the university, how have you gone about that? If I may ask another question. Okay,
so what we have are like strategic leads who sit on our advisory group. So there is a kind of oversight of some like senior professorial colleagues who link in with us. Sometimes I would describe it as being, say there was a need expressed within the community. It's not us saying, oh, there's a really good grant opportunity, I'm going to go and find a few friends and whack this in, and we'll go and tell the community this is a really good idea. It comes the other way around. So if the community say, look, actually, we're struggling with a piece of work around, I don't know, housing, or we're struggling with a piece of work around health, which definitely occurred within the substance use and mental health space, we then go across the institution to work with like-minded colleagues. And they do have to be like-minded, Abigail, because what we don't want is people who just want to come in for the purposes of, you know, getting their own papers written or, you know, getting a nice big project up and running for themselves. So if there's a need comes from the community, we then put together a good configuration. So examples would include, as I say, social work, colleagues from public health, colleagues who would be, say, you know, consultant psychiatrists or whatever's relevant within the space that we need to pull them in from. And that's how we do it. But I would say it's very much community driven in terms of need.
Thank you.
Do you know what? If there aren't any more burning questions, we don't want to sit torturing everybody. Presumably, Matt, do people get access to the slides? Then you send them around more broadly for folk who weren't able to make it?
That's right. So normally the presentation's available. This is available, so the recording. But if you want to send me your slides as well, I can also send that out.
Yeah, that, you know, we're more than happy to, yeah, we're more than happy to share. And if people then get a chance, maybe look at it after the fact, and we'd be delighted for anybody, you know, who's on the call or beyond to reach out and have a chat with us about anything, because as Andrew was saying, we're really keen to keep up the connections. So yeah. And it was really good to get the opportunity to do this morning. And Abby will be in touch around the great work around the chapters and the book. And like, we do really want to kind of continue where we can in terms of building relationships through the LPIP Strategic Coordination Hub and beyond.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.